welcome to the Writecast podcast, a podcast to help actors find auditions and book roles. I'm your host, Ashley Scott Myers. Today we have Jared Bankens. He's an actor who lives in Louisiana and has built a great career living far from Hollywood. He's been able to figure out the local film scene and get cast in tons of productions that film throughout the Southeast. Films like Venom and the new Bill and Ted Face the Music. And he's very open about how he's able to book these sorts of gigs. So stay tuned for that interview. Since I started this podcast, I've been getting some emails from actors asking how they can audition for my films. I'm actually happy to look at actors that listen to the podcast, but I'm not casting anything right now. So if you send me an email, it'll probably just get lost before I'm doing any casting again. So I set up a short form for you to fill out, and then I'll have all the information on hand when I do begin to put my next project together. So if you're interested in potentially being considered for a role in my next project, just go to www.therightcast.com/casting, and that's /casting, CASTING. So now let's dig into today's interview with Jared Bankens. Here is the interview. Welcome, Jared, to the Writecast podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Oh, I really appreciate you having me. Thank you for asking.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Well, I come from a little tiny town in Louisiana called Westlake. Most people know, well, more people know about Lake Charles rather than Westlake. And, that's where I grew up. I got into it when there's different films I had seen when I was younger, but I really liked this Lon Chaney documentary, Lon Chaney Sr. documentary. And I thought it was the coolest thing as a kid. And as I got older, I started studying theater, and I got into film from a friend of mine who's a stand-up comedian. He had an agent here in New Orleans. So I met his agent, and then I started working.
Gotcha.
Been 2013, 2014, yeah.
Okay, so, and let's talk about some of those first steps. So when you approached this agent, did you have anything already? Did you have any kind of reel? Had you done any film or TV acting, or was it all sort of theater that you had done in college or high school?
Yeah, well, it was mostly college stuff. I did some silly short film. Oh, geez. But it was definitely, when I met my agent, he just wanted to give me a read, wanted me to read something from some sides that he had emailed to me. So we met up in public. Sorry, that's my cat.
Yeah, no worries.
We met out at the park, did the scenes with him, chit-chat, and he was like, okay, well, all right, let's work together.
Okay. And so what does that look like when you get signed with an agent? Is there a lot of production in Louisiana that he was able to get you right out for auditions?
Oh yeah. It was probably the very next day I had my first one. And, that was a little bit of a learning curve because this was right when self-taping was really, really, really taken off everywhere. It was around the very beginning of 2013. So that was a little bit of a learning curve, doing things the industry way because there weren't nearly as many resources as there are now about self-taping. So I had to ask him and ask, friends that I would start meeting at auditions or callbacks, how, tips and tricks. Which is great being in the Southeast in general is that there's a lot more people willing to help, in my experience anyway.
Yeah. I'm curious, what sort of preparation did you do for this meeting? Did you get the sides beforehand? Did you research it? Did you kind of go in there cold? What was sort of your approach to this meeting?
I had no idea what I was doing. I just memorized the sides as best as I could. And, cause I was doing theater, it was mostly, you do an audition and a callback, your audition is some monologues. And then when you do a callback, you have the script in your hand. And, film, it's not like that. You can get 6 pages of dialogue and you have to, get it 8 a.m. and then by 5 p.m. you have to have it finished and turned into one of those casting networks.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, as you've been moving along in your career, getting cast, has it occurred to you to move to Los Angeles? And why not? Do you think it could help? And what's sort of your approach or advice to other actors who might be facing the same sort of dilemma?
I would honestly say, unless Los Angeles calls you, I wouldn't go, because there are other areas where there is plenty of there's plenty of film being done, and you can get involved in local casting. Like in New Orleans, I mean, not just myself, but a lot of my other friends, we get cast in really great substantial roles, and there hasn't really been a need for any of us to go to Los Angeles, especially with it's a smaller community, and from here to Atlanta or Mississippi, Alabama, all of these places, it's not necessarily, it's still not easy, but to be able to get noticed more is a little easier.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Sort of the big fish in a smaller pond.
It can get to that point, yeah. And then you can, then once Los Angeles calls you, then you go over there. That's kind of been the thing for all of us, at least a lot of us guys over here.
Mm-hmm. Do you continue to do theater work in your local area?
Oh man, no. Oh no. I left theater a long time ago. I love doing it, but it would have to be something really, really, really good. Something like some Samuel Beckett to kind of bring me back, but at the time I don't have the time to do it now.
Gotcha. What do you recommend if you meet a new actor? Do you recommend that they go and try this? It seems to me that's usually like a first stepping stone for many actors, is sort of that local theater scene. Do you think it did help prepare you, or do you think maybe they should skip that step and try to get an agent, get commercials, get local productions?
I would honestly say, I mean, especially now, you can find so many great online resources for coaching, and for, they have some great workshops on video auditioning and cold reading. And honestly, if you can't afford to go to college, or you don't want to do theater, absolutely do that. The best homework I've ever gotten, in my opinion, like for me, is, I have, I don't know how many different folders on, or whatever you call it, on my YouTube account, where it's just filled up with video footage of just normal people talking. Like, that's the best homework I've gotten. Obscure interviews, anything like that. Yeah. Like going, watching people, and that's in addition to what I was saying about there's so many great online resources. And I would say you don't necessarily have to go to theater.
Gotcha. Do you mind actually telling us what some of these online resources are that you use? Like, what are the actual websites that you recommend?
I got to look up one of them. One of them is Glorioso Casting. They do a lot of workshops, and so do I think Coulon, Coulon, Coulon Casting. Those are great to follow on Instagram. Trying to think who else. Jim Gleason. Jim Gleason's a great resource. Okay. He's a fantastic acting coach and teacher. And with them, they always, they have others that they advertise too.
Gotcha.
At least on social media that I've seen.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But that's
so perfect. Yeah, I'll round that stuff up for the show notes so people can click over to it. So let's talk about the early part of your career and some of these early shorts that you did. Just looking at your IMDb page, East Acton, Charles Clarenby, Rudy Who, True Heroes. Just give us a little bit of insight into those. How did you get cast, and did they help sort of prepare you for bigger projects?
Yeah, they, I mean, it was the first couple where they were just like some open calls or something like that. And I had friends that had told me about them and said, that I did theater with. And they said, well, just go on and try. And then I did, and it was pretty much me going in there and reading and I guess doing like a regular cold read audition.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as like preparing me, in a way they did. In a way they did, but I guess really what they prepped me for was that in each one being, I guess, different, run at either a really high standard or run at not a very high standard. So I guess mostly what I had learned was that that's pretty much how it's going to go professionally, is that there are different standards, and that in each one is always different with its own challenges. And but yeah, they did a little bit, I would say.
Okay.
Because I was always more about, and I still am. It's just it's never enough. I have to go to the next one.
Gotcha. I'm curious, you mentioned too that you heard about these auditions through friends, and you mentioned earlier in the interview, this idea of sort of community. I think that's so important for someone, especially someone that's not in LA. How did you build this community? Were these people you met in local theater? Were these people you met in some of these workshops, acting workshops? How did you sort of get involved in the local community to meet these people?
Well, we, a couple of us, because we were in Louisiana, some of the guys that were like my age, like another great character actor, Jared Mitchell, and I were friends in college because we did, our universities did theater festivals around, Louisiana and then, outside of the state. But he and I had met each other. And, so Jared is one of the nicest, best people on the planet, introduced me to so many people. And then like each person you meet from here and there on, whether it be, at auditions or callbacks or even on set, you guys run into each other constantly. So that's what happens like from here to Atlanta and the Carolinas, like the whole Southeast region is kind of like that. But I've also noticed that, from LA, when shows come, from LA or if there's crew from up in New York, you start to run into a lot of the same people again. Mm-hmm. But everybody ends up being so interconnected that the community's a lot smaller than people would think.
Yeah, for sure. So it looks like on IMDb, your first really big film was Mississippi Grind, starring Ryan Reynolds. And let's talk about that for a second. How did you get in the audition, and then ultimately, how did you get cast in that project?
That was, I had been with my agent for, I guess about like 10 months, 9 or 10 months. I was reading for that, and I got an audition for that, the Allman Brothers movie, which is that's an interesting story, and another film that I can't remember, but it was great because I went to the callback for each one. One was in Georgia. That was the Allman Brothers one. And then I went to New Orleans, which is where the Mississippi Grind and the other one were. But by this point, I had seen these casting directors multiple times. I'd already started to get some kind of rapport with them. And basically each time I went to the callbacks, the director's there and asks you to read, and you do it. And then if you did good, they'll say, well, no, that's not true. They'll give you notes. And if you did really good, they'll always like, that was great. I don't ever know about if you didn't do well, because most of them are really good about that. Like, I guess maybe it'd be like, thanks. But that had happened. I went to Georgia. We were having rehearsal for the Allman Brothers movie because I had booked that one. And then for Mississippi Grind, I got a call on my way over there to Georgia from my agent and said, "Hey, they loved you. They booked you, and these are the dates that you need available." So they had to talk to production on the Allman Brothers movie about dates or whatever. I mean, it feels like it was decades ago, but in early 2014.
Were you able to do the Allman Brothers movie?
No, that's an interesting story to go look up. It was called Midnight Rider, and there's a documentary about it. But yeah, that was my first experience with something really horrifying on a set. There was a death on set.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah,
I was at base camp when it happened. Me and the other guys that were in the band.
Gotcha.
So that was my first. That was actually my first gig, like professional gig I booked, and then I booked Mississippi Grind right after that.
Gotcha.
Like a day or so later. It was wild, man.
Yeah, I'm sure. So let's talk about some of your other credits as you're kind of going along. Vincent Roxy, starring Emil Hirsch, you start to get some of these bigger projects. Did you feel like once you booked those first ones, the Mississippi Grind and this Allman Brothers, Midnight Rider, did that help? Did it sort of propel you to the next one? Or was it more of just getting to know these casting directors? Because I hear that so often from actors too. Once you've seen the same casting director 10 times, they start to remember you. You actually have a relationship with them. So that's a big turn in things too. But what is sort of your experience? Did these projects kind of get you going in a different direction?
Yeah, they give you confidence. That's a thing you really got to try to hold on to, is the belief in the work that you're doing and the belief in yourself. And you got to be relentless, because yes, these relationships with these casting directors is so important, because there gets to a point where they'll go directly to your agent, like, "Hey, please get him to read this," or they'll send you, "Hey, I need you to read this." But getting the work really does help, because they start to see that, hey, he's okay. These directors like him. They're starting to work more. Okay, then we've heard no bad reports about them, so they're fun to work with. They're good to work with. So it all is, I would say relationship with casting directors and and getting the work with boosting that confidence, and that those are the two biggest things that help.
Yeah. For sure. So let's talk about Abacus. It looked to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, just looking at your resume, that was your first lead in a feature film?
Well, that was kind of that was something a friend of mine did. It was like we wanted to try and do something over the course of, I think it was 48 hours, maybe 48 to 72 hours, and do an entire feature.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very, but yeah, that one and Demonologist were done by the same director, and he and I met on this other film called Belle, go lay down. On this other film that I have no idea what it was. But he and I met on there, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm doing these movies. You want to do them?" Yeah, that was. I don't know if that was my first. Yeah, I guess it would technically be. Yeah. It wasn't ever released, though, so.
Oh, okay. But it sounds like it was the relationship. And I'm sort of curious. You mentioned early in the interview, there's sort of two different types of productions, which it sounded like sort of the low budget, disorganized productions, and the higher budget, more Hollywood productions with bigger budgets. Do you find that your agent is the one that helps you book those bigger projects, and you're the one that finds some of these smaller projects? Like you just talked about, it really was the relationship that got you that lead. You met this guy and stuff. How does it break down? And then ultimately, how does it break down in terms of just auditions that you go out on? How many do you get yourself? How many does your agent get? And how many, actual gigs do you get that come from you and versus your agent?
Well, go lay down. lay down. My agent pretty much gets me. That is, yeah, that's where I get everything. Like, there's been a couple. There was one I did recently. That was from, that was from a prior relationship, or like people that I worked with on other stuff. But yeah, it's definitely my agent that does it. Like, it's just been a couple where, hey man, you wanna come do this? I
Mhm.
won't. Yeah, my agent's great.
Gotcha.
Yeah, she helped. She's like that bridge, not just that bridge, but between the casting directors and I. But man, she's amazing. She's great.
Gotcha. I'm curious what you have these days in terms of headshots, and maybe you could give us a little advice on a little advice to upcoming actors on headshots. How do you find a good photographer? How often do you get new headshots? And what sort of headshots do you have? What sort of different looks do you have? And what are your recommendations for actors?
Oh man, first recommendation: find clothes like that are simple that can go for certain character types. Like, I realize I have a different type of look, so you got to figure out what's good with that look. And that's something, at least from my experience, that's what my agent and I talked about. Um, so it'd be, like this kind of worn out hoodie with a leather jacket over it, or whatever, but very simple colors that make your eyes pop. Um, and really, you gotta go. You get what you pay for. So definitely try to find a great photographer near you and search online headshots. I'm trying to think of a good one. A great reference, I would say, is Jackson Beals.
Okay.
He's New Orleans and Atlanta, incredible. But yeah, like, if you can't find anybody to do headshots for you, but you know someone who's good at photography,
Hmm.
Jackson Beals, and then get them to do that.
Gotcha. And what does an actor expect to pay for something like this? In the year 2021.
Oh man, I mean, for good headshots, upwards of $200 or more.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, if someone who really is great at photography and can match that, I mean, Jackson. I'm not going to say Jackson's amazing, but you can find someone who can replicate that pretty well, then do
Hmm.
that.
Gotcha. What's next for you? What do you have on your docket?
Well, I did have a film just come out in June on Prime called "We All Think We're Special,"
No, nice.
and right now I have a table read tomorrow, but I can't say what it is because I signed an NDA.
Okay.
But a lot of auditions and callbacks started popping back up the last couple weeks.
Yeah,
So
yeah, with COVID
yeah.
finally, yeah, getting under control. I'm sure, yeah, it's been tough. So tell us a little bit about We All Think We're Special. What's that film about, and how did you get cast in that?
Um, so it's this guy and his best friend. They've been hanging out, partying or whatever, at his house, and he is a functioning alcoholic. And so it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's his mom's place. And anyway, so his friend that's staying with him takes his car apart, takes the car apart, all this, throws all of his alcohol away, and basically he tries to detox him. And that's the whole film, is
Oh,
this
okay,
guy through detox. Yeah.
gotcha,
Uh,
gotcha.
yeah, it's not happy, but I mean, it was fun to make.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good sign. And how did you get cast in this lead?
Actually, that short film, True Heroes, one of my absolute best friends on the planet, he's in that with me, and that was where he and I
Okay.
first met, was on there. So he did a film with this director and said, "Hey, you got to meet my buddy Jared. You got to meet my buddy Jared. You should write," like jokingly, like, "You should write something for us." And so then Kirby actually did. I mean, it
Huh.
took and then in 2019 we shot it.
Okay. So yeah, that's fantastic. I like to wrap up these interviews just by asking the guest if there's anything that they've seen lately that maybe was a little under the radar that they thought was really excellent. You have any recommendations for our listeners? Anything Netflix, Hulu, anything you've seen maybe that might have gone a little bit under the radar?
There was something I actually started watching on HBO. It did go under the radar too. I'm looking up the title because I would like more people to watch this. So sorry about that. My so bad.
No, this is good. I'm looking forward to hearing your recommendation.
High Maintenance.
High Maintenance. Okay.
It's a series on Netflix, and I normally mostly what I watch is documentaries. So if there's a series, and I like it, for me, I'm like, well, it's got to be good if it keeps at least. I don't mean it in that way. Like my taste is so grand. No.
Yeah. Your attention is so short, like all of us.
Yeah, my attention span is very short, and if you can catch mine, then I want to recommend it. But it's a funny show.
Okay, perfect. High Maintenance. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes so people can click over and keep up with you.
Instagram is the best way to follow me. Okay. That, or if you randomly search on IMDb, that's usually it. My Instagram is all lowercase. It's MR_Bankens.
Okay. Perfect. Well, Jared, I really appreciate you coming on this interview and talking with me today. Good luck with all these projects.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, man.
Bye. If you enjoyed this interview, do check out my other podcast over at sellingyourscreenplay.com, where I've got hundreds of interviews. They're mostly with producers, directors, and writers, but there are some great interviews with actors as well. But even the episodes with directors, producers, and writers, I think often have a lot of good information in those interviews for actors as well, even if it's just to understand that part of the business better. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review anywhere you find this podcast. You can probably leave a review, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or just retweet it or share it on Facebook. These reviews and shares are very helpful to let the various platforms know what people think of the podcast, and with some good reviews, it can really help get the podcast in front of more people. So if you have a minute and wouldn't mind just leaving a nice review, it would be very much appreciated. That's the show. Thank you for listening.